Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dead on Dave, and today I'm here to talk to you about women's wrestling and its need for the current revolution. Now, one of the reasons why women's wrestling needed the revolution in the first place was that it was brutally killed. But who's responsible for this grisly murder? WWE? Maybe. They're the ones usually making the decisions. How about lack of in-ring talent in the division? Certainly a factor. But what about that strange limbo period between the era of pillow fights, swimsuit competitions, and hoe trains, and the hypocritical SJW culture and false narrative of women solely being abused? This is nothing more than sex objects, leading to the attacks on ring girls, ice girls, and models. Sure, the buck could stop there, but I believe there's another culprit, one man to be precise. A man who had a very long, checkered, but surprisingly successful wrestling career. A man that became the comic relief of WWE, but also a man responsible for the hindrance, if not death, of at least 3 promising or successful WWE women's wrestlers, as well as the shameful burial of an entire women's division at WrestleMania 25. Of course, I'm talking about Santino Marella. Today, he stands trial for these crimes. Is the label of cold-blooded wrestling woman serial killer just? Or is he merely a victim of circumstance and nothing more than the nail in the coffin of a truly awful era of female in-ring competition? We find out today on Crimes Against Wrestling, the trial of Santino Marella.
Real talk, man. Yeah. It's pressure. So much pressure. Sometimes I'm like, I get it.
Why would I pass up on the weed? Problems in your life, they don't want you to succeed. Try to go to God, baby, he ain't feeling me. All this pain in my heart, I have a nigga on his knees. Lyrically, I am the
All rise for the Honorable Judge Dead on Dave. Be seated. Santino Marella. I think it's fair to say that a good number of people think you should be charged with many a crime against wrestling, and perhaps one day you will. However, today you are being charged with the atrocious crimes against women's wrestling. And I've got to be honest, the evidence against you is pretty damning, sir. Now, there is no question that the state of women's wrestling was, let's be kind and say, in flux. That was even before you got there and got your sock snake all over it. However, that does not give you or anyone else the right to smash its head open with a rock. We don't allow malnourished transients, and we will not stand for it here either. So let's begin with your first victim, sir. Your first of 3, really. Let us begin with Maria Kanellis. Now, Maria in the WWE was a beautiful young fashionable lady of the ring, oft under or misused. Right before she was paired as your girlfriend, however, she was on a huge rocket ship to the top, as was evident how she would later grab the cover of Playboy. Now, it is true that that very angle would be the emphasis of your breakup storyline, but she was already at that level at the time of your union. During that said time, she was a side note. You made her a side note, no longer of any true comedic value, which she had struggled for years to establish herself as. Now she was just a poor, borderline abused woman in a tired, rehashed storyline that we had seen a decade before with Sable and Mark Mero. Now, on the flip side of that, one could argue that wrestling fans actually owe you a thank you, because this storyline was one of her last in WWE and possibly one of the deciding factors in her leaving the old good old E, for the indie world where she would flourish and become one of the best heels in all of wrestling, regardless of gender. So certainly, long term, she ended up being more than okay, but that does not excuse your role in her WWE murder. Now let's move on to Beth Phoenix, the Glamazon, a destructive force of nature in the WWE, and one of the lone bright spots in a very gloomy period of in-ring competition. That is until she became your hesitant girlfriend. The storyline with you took away her strength and replaced it with awkward courtship. She never really recovered from her time with you, and one can certainly surmise that that period anchored to you was one of the last straws that led her to her departure from the WWE. Now, I think it's fair to note that she has found a life of motherhood and bliss with Edge, Adam Copeland. And that could have been her goal all along. But I don't think it would be unfair to say that with her look, power, and underrated charisma, she would have certainly reached huge heights within the WWE in her wrestling life, if it would not have been suffocated by you and that green reptilian version of Mr. Sacco. Now that's 2 wrestling lives put 6 feet under by your hands, Mr. Marella. But it wouldn't be the last, would it? No, your final victim would be sweet, lovable Emma. Emma was an awkward yet charming NXT Women's title contender, capturing fans' attention with her deceptively effective ring work. She used social media to help get herself over and even earned what some might consider an early promotion to the main roster. What would have happened with her run on Raw or SmackDown in that iteration of her character? We'll never know. As once again, she was saddled with an albatross, this time in the form of a quasi-love interest with you. But that wasn't enough. She actually began to take on your mannerisms and gimmicks in the form of your speed walk and even a pink version of that aforementioned sock prop. You drove her to places so devastating that when she can no longer steal the spotlight, she decided to steal merchandise instead, for which she was caught, suspended for, and subsequently sent back down to NXT. Now, personally, I look at Emma as a survival of you, sir, as she reinvented herself as evil Emma and even made it back to the main roster, despite being saddled with yet another burden in the form of Dana Brooke. Emma is now once again being repackaged, and it does look like she's going to be okay as Emelina, despite the severe damage your influence had on her. Now, Santino, if this was all that we had in this case against you, I think it would suffice. However, your most egregious offense is yet to be mentioned. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to take you back to the build-up for WrestleMania 25, where a battle royal would be held to crown the first, and thank God, ever, only Miss WrestleMania. Now, I will not go too much into details. It would be cruel and unusual punishment for any of you to relive those events. In short, you, sir, dressed in drag as your sister, and not only entered the Battle Royal, but won it. In an act so grievous that it started a social media movement, #GiveDivas a chance. Mr. Marella, I will now read a list of all the women you buried on that day. Layla, Joy Giovanni, Rosa Mendez, Alicia Fox, the original diva, Sunny, Tori Wilson, Jackie, Maria, Gail Kim, Jillian Hall, Eve Torres, Tiffany, Kelly, Molly Holly, Maurice, Katie Lee Burchell, Natalia, Victoria, Brie Bella, Nikki Bella, Mickey James, Michelle McCool, Melina, and Beth Phoenix. They all can be laid at your feet as you stood there getting a sash put on you. It was shameless, sir. It was shameless. You should be ashamed. I have no choice with all of this preponderance of evidence to find you more than guilty, sir. And not only one count, but two. Both of these crimes should send you to the clink for back-to-back life sentences, sir. Now, I understand that you are no longer wrestling, and I think that is actually a good thing, not only for your health, but for the sake and safety of women's wrestlers and gimmicks everywhere. I don't think that it is unfair that these three women and their WWE careers should be remembered with reverence. And I hope you think about your crime, sir, and I hope that you will never again grace the ring to slaughter yet another bright women's wrestler's future. Now, some of you might think that this judgment is unfair. Some of you may not think that it was enough, that there are many more crimes for which Santino Marella can stand trial for. And sirs and ladies, I believe you are correct. But let us not ever forget for a moment that Santino Marella and other people who are responsible for these crimes are only tools of destruction given to us by the people in charge. Vince McMahon, the WWE, Kevin Dunn, whoever else you want to blame. Women's wrestling has never really, truly been spotlighted for long periods of time. Sure, we've had some great moments. Trish and Lita becoming that main event spotlight. Now with what they're doing with almost an SJW feel, like they have to get on board with the rest of the women's lib movement that's happening right now in the world. But the reality is Vince McMahon has never been a real big fan of women's wrestling, mainly because there hasn't been a whole lot of money in it over the years. And I think that is fair to say that that is true. However, that cannot excuse some of the things that we have seen. And today, Santino Marella has paid for his crime. Hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Crimes Against Wrestling. If you have a moment that you would like to see judged, juried, and executed by me, the Honorable Dead on Dave, go ahead and hit me up in the comments section or on Twitter at DeadOnDaveV. I really do appreciate you guys watching this episode of Crimes Against Wrestling. We will see you next time right here on Dead on Dave Productions. Like, subscribe, and share. And as always, if you don't have talent, have talented friends. We'll see you next time.